Rain tapped gently against the airport glass, tracing uncertain paths like thoughts that didn't want to be spoken. Inside the waiting area, people shuffled through the boarding line, tired, distracted, half listening to the distant call of Flight 782. Among them sat Elijah, a young black teen, his hoodie damp from the storm outside. His headphones rested around his neck, but there was no music playing. The only rhythm came from the rain, steady and patient, like it knew what was coming. Across from him stood Charles, a white businessman with the kind of confidence that filled silence without apology. His phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp, his words cutting through the air. He argued about his seat, his voice full of entitlement that didn't need to be loud to be heard. When he hung up, his gaze landed on Elijah, or rather on the boarding pass in Elijah's hand. His eyes narrowed, the calculation quick and quiet. The gate agent called for first-class boarding. Elijah rose, polite, composed. Charles followed, a smirk faint on his lips as if the moment already belonged to him. He leaned closer, voice smooth but edged with arrogance, asking if Elijah was sure that seat was his. The words carried centuries in them, softly spoken, heavily meant. Elijah didn't flinch. He looked at his ticket, then back at him, and simply said, "Yeah, that's what it says." His calm unsettled more than anger ever could. The air grew still. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. That silence, cold, loaded, unbroken, was the beginning. The kind of silence where injustice starts to breathe, slow and certain, waiting for its moment to show its face. The man's shadow stretched over Elijah's seat, long and heavy under the cabin lights. "You're in the wrong seat, son," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of assumption. The word son slid out sharp, dressed like respect but meant to shrink. Elijah looked up, confusion flickering across his face, but he stayed polite. "This is 3A, he replied, showing his ticket. "That's what it says." Charles tilted his head, scanning the boy as though the uniform of youth itself proved him mistaken. "Must be some mix-up," he said, glancing toward the attendant. "I fly this route every month. This isn't where he belongs." The words weren't shouted, but they carried. Heads turned briefly, then quickly away. No one wanted to be involved. The flight attendant approached, her practiced smile trembling slightly. "Sir, let me check the manifest." Her eyes darted between them, between power and silence, then down to the screen in her hand. A pause, a swallow. Then that tone people use when they want to make trouble disappear. Maybe we can find another seat?" Elijah's heart pounded, but his voice stayed calm. "I don't need another seat. I have this one." His ticket trembled slightly in his fingers, but his words didn't. Charles exhaled sharply, smiling like someone indulging a child. "Kid, it's not that serious." But it was. The stillness that followed felt like glass about to break. The other passengers stared at their screens, pretending to read. The attendant hesitated again, a moment too long. And that silence, that careful silence, became its own verdict. Elijah looked straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing, breathing slow. Outside, rain streaked the window again, tracing the same nervous lines as before. The cabin went quiet in that uneasy way where everyone breathes, but no one wants to be heard. The scanner beeped again, a single stubborn sound that confirmed Elijah's truth. "Seat 3A, the attendant murmured, voice cracking slightly. Her hands trembled as she handed the device back, avoiding both of their eyes. Charles leaned back, smirking, that thin smile of someone who'd never had to question what the world owed him. "Technology makes mistakes," he muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A nervous chuckle from someone 2 rows back. Then nothing. Elijah didn't move. His jaw tightened, eyes steady. "It didn't make a mistake," he said quietly. "You just don't like what it says." His words weren't sharp. They were steady, careful, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that makes people shift in their seats. A mother across the aisle pulled her daughter's headphones tighter. A businessman typed faster on his laptop, pretending not to hear. Silence wasn't neutral. It was participation dressed as comfort. The attendant swallowed hard. "Sir, please," Charles cut her off, his tone controlled but dangerous. "You don't want to make this bigger than it is. Trust me." Elijah looked up at him, calm but unyielding. "You already did." For a second, something flickered across Charles's face. Not guilt, but confusion, like he couldn't understand why this moment wasn't folding the way it always had. No one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence that felt heavier than thunder. Elijah turned toward the window again, the reflection of his face overlapping with clouds. The scanner's final beep still echoed softly in his mind. Proof, fragile but real. That truth had made a sound today. The engines roared softly beneath the cabin. A sound that used to mean escape, now humming like quiet judgment. Elijah sat still, hands folded, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. The air vent, the fabric of the seat, the invisible weight pressing down on his chest. Charles shifted beside him, pretending to read an email, though his hands shook just slightly. Power, for the first time, felt heavy in his own grasp. "Are you really gonna sit there?" Charles whispered, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "You could just make this easy." Elijah didn't look at him. "It's already easy. You just don't like who it's easy for." A few rows back, someone lifted a phone. No flash, no sound, just the quiet click of history being recorded without permission. The flight attendant hesitated near the galley, her hand on the intercom. The captain's voice was a distant murmur behind the locked door. No one wanted to touch the moment. Narration slipped through the silence, the kind that exists when truth becomes too visible to ignore. The boy's stillness wasn't defiance. It was survival wearing calm as armor. The man beside him wasn't angry anymore, just unraveling under his own reflection. A woman coughed, the sound trembling. Someone whispered, "Is he filming?" Another replied, "Don't get involved." Yet, every eye that dared to glance forward stayed there a second too long, watching, waiting, recording something they couldn't unsee. Elijah's mother's words echoed somewhere in the back of his mind. "Power doesn't scream, son. Sometimes it just stands up and doesn't move." The plane continued to hum. The camera stayed steady, and in 10 quiet minutes, silence itself began to tilt. The video begins with a tremble, the sound of the phone mic picking up uneven breaths. A hushed, "Don't let them see," whispered by the girl holding it. The frame shakes as it zooms in on Elijah, seated calmly, and Charles, standing just above him, his privilege cracking into visible frustration. The flight attendant's voice can barely be heard. "Sir, please, let's not make this harder." But it's too late. The camera has already decided what the truth looks like. Within minutes, the footage leaks, uploaded, shared, reshared. A caption appears. "Black teen told to move for a white passenger and refused." The comments flood instantly. Unbelievable. Still happening in 2025? His calm. That's power. Somewhere, a journalist bookmarks it. Somewhere else, a PR intern panics. Charles sits at home that night, scrolling through his own face on the screen. Every freeze frame catches something he never noticed before. The curl of his lip, the tilt of his chin, the look that once meant control, now burned into millions of timelines as guilt. His phone vibrates. Messages flood in, some supportive, most not. He throws it aside, but the sound keeps coming, endless, merciless. Elijah, meanwhile, watches in silence. His mother stands behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You didn't need to say a word," she whispers. He nods, unsure whether pride or sadness fills the space between them. Narration drifts through the digital noise. The world had always known injustice. It just hadn't seen it this close, this raw, this still. The boy didn't fight. The man didn't fall. The camera only showed what silence had been hiding all along, and this time, silence lost. Elijah sits by the window, the glow of the screen reflecting on his face. The viral clip replays in silence. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator fills the room. His mother stands behind him, folding laundry with slow, steady hands. "You see?" she says softly, not looking at him. They smile when they take from you. That's how they were taught. Calm faces, sharp hearts. He doesn't respond. Just stares at the frozen image of Charles mid-command, his finger pointed, his authority intact even in stillness. A flash. Elijah's mind drifts to the past. 5th grade, a teacher accusing him of cheating because the essay was too well written. The same pause, the same half-smile. He remembers the principal's words. We're not calling it punishment, just correction. The memory fades, leaving the taste of quiet humiliation. Miles away, Charles sits in his office, blinds drawn, the city dim outside. His assistant leaves another message. Sir, HR wants to discuss the video. He doesn't reply. Instead, his mind rewinds. A decade earlier, a black employee quitting after a misunderstanding. Another one after that. Each time, Charles had smoothed things over. Coffee, handshake, NDA. We're all good, he'd said then. But the words echo now, hollow, exposed. He leans back, staring at the framed award on his desk. Leader in corporate integrity. His reflection cuts through the glass, tired, cornered. For the first time, he can't tell whether the face staring back is the man he wanted to be or the one everyone else now sees. Narration slides between them. Some lessons were passed down in silence, not through cruelty, but through comfort. Power didn't need words. It only needed tradition. And both men were born beneath it. The plane feels smaller now, quieter, heavier. Elijah's hands rest on the armrest for a second longer before he rises. No defiance, no rush, just a calm movement that slices through the tension like truth through pretense. Charles exhales, half in victory, half in confusion. The stewardess murmurs, "Thank you, sir." But her voice trembles, as if she too knows what gratitude shouldn't sound like. Elijah steps aside. A soft shuffle of feet, a man passing him without a glance. The new passenger sits where he once did, adjusting his jacket, unaware that he's sitting on something heavier than leather. History. Elijah doesn't look back, but the cabin does. A woman in row 6 lowers her phone. A child whispers to her father, "Why did he have to move?" The father doesn't answer, just stares at the seat. Charles tries to settle, but the silence turns on him. Every click of a seatbelt feels like judgment. Every eye that avoids his feels like accusation. He opens his mouth, maybe to justify, maybe to breathe, but nothing comes out. The stewardess walks past him, her eyes fixed on the floor. Elijah stands near the back now, beside the restroom door, holding onto the metal rail. His reflection in the mirror shows a boy who didn't lose, only shifted ground. His mother's words echo faintly. "Dignity doesn't shout, son. It waits." He closes his eyes. Narration drifts quietly. Some victories are invisible, measured not in applause but in restraint. The seat he left behind wasn't empty. It held a story, a silence, a reckoning no one could unsee. And for the first time, those who watched couldn't tell who really moved, the boy or their conscience. The video plays on loop, that quiet moment when Elijah stands. No shouting, no fight, just a boy refusing to vanish. The intern hesitates before speaking. "Sir, it's everywhere." The CEO doesn't look up from his papers. "Another online stunt?" he mutters. But her trembling voice answers, "No, sir. It's you. It's our plane." The room falls still. The air feels tight, like the walls know shame before he does. The screen flickers again. Elijah's calm face, the stewardess avoiding his eyes, the silent man in the stolen seat. The CEO's throat tightens. "Turn it off," he says too quickly. She doesn't. Outside, the internet burns with hashtags, outrage, and truth disguised as retweets. A mother in Detroit says, "That was my son once." A pilot in Texas whispers on camera, "We all saw it happen." The world for once isn't moving on. It's circling back. The CEO stands, pacing. "We can fix this," he says, but his voice breaks on the last word. The intern finally looks at him, steady, unafraid. "Sir, maybe we shouldn't." Silence lands like judgment. Somewhere between fear and pride, something cracks inside him. The screen's reflection trembles across his face. An empire built on silence, now exposed by a boy's restraint. Narration seeps in softly. The world once watched injustice and scrolled past. But this time, the stillness spoke louder than rage. This time, the whisper of dignity outshouted the noise of power. And for the first time, the ones who built walls of silence felt what it was like to be trapped inside them. The intercom hums before the captain's voice slices through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard disturbance, we'll be returning to Atlanta." The words hang in the air like smoke. No one speaks. Even the engines seem quieter, as if the plane itself is ashamed. Charles's hand tightens on the armrest. "This is ridiculous," he mutters, voice cracking. The stewardess avoids his eyes, her clipboard trembling slightly. Across the aisle, Elijah sits still, calm, unmoved, his silence heavier than accusation. A man 2 rows back whispers, "They're turning around." "Because of him?" A woman replies softly, "No, because of what was done to him." The shift begins there, small, almost invisible. Dignity reclaiming gravity. Charles's phone buzzes. Notifications flash. Chas Flight 381. Chas Elijah didn't move. His jaw locks. He glances toward Elijah, searching for anger but finding only composure. "You think you've won?" he says, barely above a whisper. Elijah looks at him, not with hate, but with something colder. "I didn't play," he replies. The stewardess kneels beside Elijah's seat, voice fragile. "Sir, I'm sorry. I should have—" He cuts her off gently. "You saw it." "That's enough." She nods, tears threatening. The silence that follows feels sacred, like the first moment of truth in a room full of lies. Narration enters softly. Above the clouds, power doesn't scream when it falls. It folds quietly under its own weight. What was once authority now trembles, unsure of its reflection. As the city lights reappear below, every passenger understands they are returning not to Atlanta, but to accountability. The plane circles, the world watching, and somewhere in that turning sky, the balance begins to shift back to where it always belonged. The terminal feels colder than it should. Reporters cluster near the glass, whispering like distant thunder. Cameras blink, hungry. Then Marcus Hale steps forward, calm, pressed suit, eyes unwavering. His presence alone draws silence tighter than any command could. The airline manager straightens, trying to reclaim authority. "Mr. Hale, this was an unfortunate—" Marcus interrupts softly. "An unfortunate what?" His tone doesn't rise, but the man falters. "Misunderstanding," he finishes weakly. Marcus's eyes flick toward the window where the plane still sits grounded. "You grounded my patience long before this flight ever turned around." Elijah stands nearby, silent, small beside the weight of this moment. Marcus doesn't look at him, not yet. His words are for those who built the system that hums beneath their feet. "You let a man humiliate a child," Marcus says, voice even. "Then your staff backed him because his skin matched yours. And when the truth came out, your first instinct was damage control, not decency." The manager stammers, "We're handling the matter internally." Marcus steps closer. "You are the matter internally." His silence afterward lands heavier than the line itself. Cameras click, recording the stillness of consequence. Narration breathes in between. Justice, when it finally speaks, doesn't shout. It stares long enough for guilt to see itself. The stewardess wipes her eyes. Charles, the man who started it all, avoids looking up. For the first time, he looks small, like noise that's finally run out of echo. Marcus turns to Elijah at last. "You did right by doing nothing," he says quietly. "That's how truth wins. Not by noise, but by not moving when the world tells you to." Elijah nods. The cameras blink again, capturing not a confrontation, but correction. Charles sat in his car long after the news stopped rolling. The dashboard light flickered across his hands, the same hands that once pointed, demanded, and dismissed without consequence. Now they trembled faintly. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy like the air before a storm that never comes. His phone vibrated once, then again, then nothing. The world outside didn't care to hear his side anymore. He whispered to himself, almost pleading, It wasn't that deep. I didn't mean, but the words dissolved, meaningless now. Across town, Elijah stood by the open garage, the same spot where his mother used to remind him, never fight to be seen. Just keep standing. They'll have to look eventually. Tonight, she said nothing. She just held him. The kind of hug that didn't congratulate, didn't pity, only acknowledged. Elijah exhaled. He'll apologize, won't he? His mother shook her head slowly. Some people don't know how. There was no triumph in Elijah's face, just stillness. The kind of calm that frightens people who've built their confidence on noise. At the same moment, Charles stared into the dark reflection of his windshield, his own eyes looking back like a stranger's. His voice broke into a whisper. All I said was, "Move the seat." The silence that followed said everything he refused to understand. Elijah's phone buzzed, messages from people he didn't know, praising him, defending him, turning his quiet act into a movement. He looked at his mother. It's everywhere now, she smiled faintly. Good. Maybe now silence will teach louder than anger ever could. And for once, both men sat in the quiet, one crushed by it, the other finally free within it. Marcus sat by the wide hotel window, the city lights flickering across his reflection like a storm that never quite left. His phone screen glowed, the same 7-minute clip looping quietly. No music, no commentary, just truth unfolding in silence. He didn't replay it to feel the anger again. He replayed it to remind himself how the world shifted without shouting. On the video, Elijah's voice trembled, calm, cracked, human. They told me to move, and I did. But it wasn't my seat that changed. It was theirs. Marcus closed his eyes. He'd heard power before, in boardrooms, in newsrooms, in every place that forgot what humility sounded like. But this was power without volume. A flight attendant had once told him, half smiling, "You people always make a scene." He remembered replying softly, "We don't make scenes. We live in them." Now, as the video circled the globe, he realized the irony. Silence had made the loudest noise of all. His assistant entered quietly. "Sir," CNN called again. "They want a statement." Marcus shook his head. "Let them talk. The truth doesn't need a press release." Outside, the runway blinked in rhythm, red, then white, then gold. The same sky that once carried his humiliation now carried his voice, scattered in millions of shares, stitched into late-night headlines. A pilot walking by the lobby paused at the TV screen. His eyes softened. "That's the man from the flight," he whispered. Never raised his voice once. Marcus turned away from the glass, his reflection fading behind him. The sky didn't change, he murmured, but maybe the people under it finally did. And somewhere, Elijah's words kept echoing, calm, steady, and unstoppable.